"Will you hug me for pretend?" said the poor little girl to the millionaire, not knowing who he was. If this story interested you, subscribe to our channel and tell us which city you are watching from. Let's begin. The cold rain lashed the sidewalks of downtown Seattle as if the sky were washing the city of its own sins. Caleb Morgan, a millionaire technology entrepreneur, walked aimlessly, wrapped in the silence and grief that had accompanied him since the tragic accident that took the only person who made him feel alive from his life. The city, once vibrant and familiar, now seemed just an empty echo of everything he had lost. In a dark suit, his face grim, he no longer looked like the man who graced the covers of business magazines, but rather a spectre dragging the weight of the past through streets wet with concrete and longing. It had been 6 months since Mariana. His wife had passed away after a car accident in the Cascades. The medical diagnosis spoke of multiple fractures and internal bleeding. But for Caleb, the true diagnosis was the permanent absence. The 42 years he carried now felt like double. Omnicore, his home automation technology company, continued to thrive under the command of its directors, while he drifted further and further from the corporate world he had helped build. It was in this grey setting that the improbable happened. A thin little girl with drenched clothes and a face smeared with tears and soot collided with his legs. Wide brown eyes, trembling hands, and a sentence spoken with the urgency of someone who no longer knew where to find safety. "Can you give me a fake hug?" Caleb, still stunned, looked around and saw 2 men in dark uniforms looking for something, or someone. When he turned his eyes back to the girl, she was already pressed against his chest, as if that staged hug could save her from something very real. "Mister, please pretend I'm your daughter," she whispered, trembling not only from the cold, but from the fear that radiated from her small bones. Without knowing exactly why, he returned the gesture. Perhaps it was the vulnerability exposed in those brown eyes, or perhaps it was just his instinct reacting before his mind could process. But when the 2 uniformed men approached, Caleb had already made his decision. "Honey, I've been looking all over for you. Your mother is going to be worried," he said with a naturalness that surprised him. Then he faced the 2 approaching men. "Can I help you?" "This girl is a resident of the Southern Hope Shelter. She ran away this morning," said the taller one, in a voice that showed no concern, only irritation. "We have to take her back." Caleb felt the girl clutch his coat even tighter, as if she could disappear inside it. "I'm afraid there's been some mistake. This is my daughter, Luna." The name came to his mind spontaneously, as if something greater than him was guiding his words. "Luna?" the guard questioned, consulting a clipboard. "We have a Luna Smith, 7 years old, brown hair. Matches the description." "My daughter is Luna Morgan," Caleb replied with the firmness he used in board meetings. "And if you want to continue this conversation, we'll have to call my lawyer and the police." He pulled his premium Omnicore business card from his pocket, where his name and CEO title gleamed in raised letters. The mention of the police and the business card had the desired effect. The men backed away, suspicious but intimidated. They promised to verify the information and walked away, casting suspicious glances. When they finally disappeared around the corner, Caleb crouched down to the girl's level. "Are you really Luna?" She nodded, still clinging to his coat. "But I'm not Smith. I don't have a last name right now. They say you only get a real one when someone adopts you." The answer hit Caleb like a punch. He had grown up in a middle-class family in Portland, with loving parents and a brother. He never had to question his identity or belonging. The idea of a child without a last name, like an object waiting for an owner, turned his stomach. "Why did you run away, Luna?" Her large, expressive eyes filled with tears. "Because of Leo, my brother. They're going to take him away." Her voice was firm despite her body's trembling. "A couple came yesterday. They wanted a little boy. They liked him. Only him." Caleb felt a chill that didn't come from the rain. "And why is that bad? Wouldn't it be good for Leo to have a family?" "They don't know I exist," Luna replied, with a wisdom that didn't belong to her 7 years. "No one told them. And after they take him, I'll never see Leo again." The rain intensified, and Caleb realized they were both soaked in the middle of the sidewalk. Decisions had to be made. He couldn't just leave her there, nor could he return her to a place she had fled from with such desperation. At the same time, he was aware that he had just interfered in an official process. perhaps even committing some kind of crime. Come on, let's get out of this rain and talk properly. He took her to the Fairmont Olympic Hotel, where he had kept a permanent suite, since he could no longer bear the emptiness of the mansion he had shared with Mariana. The receptionist looked curiously at the drenched girl, but the knowledge that Mr. Morgan was one of the hotel's most important guests prevented any inconvenient questions. In the elevator, Luna observed everything with a mixture of fascination and suspicion. "This is a very fancy hotel," she commented, still not letting go of Caleb's hand. "Have you ever been to a hotel before?" She shook her head. "Only shelters. 3 different ones." Then she added, "Southern Hope is the worst." In the suite, Caleb realized the new problem. The girl needed dry clothes, food, and probably a hot bath. While he looked for a towel, he called Deborah, his personal assistant for over a decade, the only person he truly trusted since Mariana's passing. "Deborah, I need you to buy some children's clothes." "For a 7-year-old girl." He paused. "Yes, it's an emergency. And bring food, too." "No, I can't explain right now." Luna observed the luxurious apartment with wide eyes but didn't touch anything, as if she were afraid to break the illusion. When Caleb handed her one of his clean t-shirts so she could change out of her wet clothes, she took it with reverent care. "You can use the bathroom to change. And there's a bathtub in there if you want to take a hot bath." "Can I really?" she asked, incredulous. "Of course. I'll be here in the living room." While the girl bathed, Caleb tried to process what was happening. In less than an hour, his solitary routine had been completely upended by a runaway child, and her story about a brother about to be separated from her forever. Part of him questioned if he was being manipulated, if this wasn't just an elaborate scam. But then he remembered the genuine terror in Luna's eyes, the way she trembled, and how she spoke of her brother with such love and concern. Luna came out of the bathroom wrapped in his white t-shirt, which looked like a dress on her. Her brown hair, now clean, fell in waves over her shoulders. Without the dirt on her face, Caleb could see a few freckles on her nose and the expression of a child carrying far too adult worries. "Feeling better?" She nodded. "Thank you for the bath. At the shelter, we only take cold showers and they have to be quick." The information provoked a new wave of indignation in Caleb. "Luna, you need to tell me more about the Southern Hope shelter. What happens there that made you run away, besides your brother's adoption?" Luna's eyes immediately darted to the floor. "I can't." "Why not?" "Because whoever talks goes to the basement room." Her voice was almost inaudible. "And it's very dark there." The suite's doorbell interrupted the conversation. It was Deborah, carrying bags of children's clothes from a department store and containers of still warm food. Deborah Allen, 38, was the kind of woman whose efficiency bordered on the supernatural. Black hair always tied in a flawless bun, thin framed glasses, and a tablet that seemed like an extension of her arm. Upon seeing Luna, her eyebrows rose, but professionalism was her middle name. "I got a variety of options. I didn't know the exact size," she explained, handing the bags to Caleb. Then she turned to Luna with a gentle smile. "Hello, sweetie. I'm Deborah." "Hi, I'm Luna," the girl replied, partially hiding behind Caleb. "Deborah is my friend," Caleb explained. "She brought clothes for you and food for us." While Luna examined the new clothes with the look of someone who had never received a gift, Caleb pulled Deborah aside. "I need you to research everything about the Southern Hope shelter, discreetly, and also about the processes of separating siblings in adoptions." "Caleb, what's going on?" Deborah rarely questioned his orders, but the presence of a clearly vulnerable child changed the scenario. "I'm not sure yet, but I think this girl and her brother are in danger." He briefly explained the encounter, Luna's desperation, and the hints about inadequate conditions at the shelter. "This is very serious," Deborah warned. "If you're with a child who is officially under state custody, technically I'm committing a crime, I know." Caleb ran a hand through his still damp hair. "But I couldn't leave her there." "You should have seen the fear in her eyes, Deborah." His assistant nodded, recognizing something in him she hadn't seen since the accident. Life. "I'll research everything. I'll also contact Mr. Miles to get us legal coverage just in case." As Deborah left, Luna had already chosen a simple set of jeans and a blue t-shirt. They sat together at the table to eat the chicken and vegetables Deborah had brought. Caleb noticed that despite her evident hunger, Luna ate slowly as if she wanted to. Make the meal last as long as possible. How long have you and your brother been at Southern Hope? He asked, trying to resume the conversation. 8 months, she replied, counting on her small fingers. Before that, we were at the children's home in Spokane, but it closed. Before that, we stayed with Grandma, but she got sick. And your parents? Luna shrugged a sadly adult gesture. I never knew my dad. My mom left when Leo was 2. Said she was going to look for work in New York City and would come back. She never did. The simple story, told without drama or self-pity, was all the more moving. Caleb felt a lump in his throat. And what's your brother like? For the first time, a genuine smile lit up Luna's face. Leo is the bravest boy in the world. He's 5, but he doesn't cry even when he's scared. He draws really well. Wants to be an astronaut. Then the smile vanished. They're going to take him away tomorrow. The couple already signed the papers. They just need to pick him up. And why don't they want to adopt you too? They don't know I exist, Luna repeated as if it were obvious. Ms. Campbell, who runs the shelter, said that siblings are harder to place together. So she doesn't even mention me when people interested in Leo show up. That doesn't seem right, Caleb commented, feeling his indignation grow. It's not. That's why I ran away. To get help. Luna stared at him with a disconcerting intensity. You're going to help me, right? You seem rich. Rich people get what they want. The observation, so sincere and direct, caught Caleb by surprise. I'll try, he answered honestly. But I don't know if being rich is enough in this case. It has to be, Luna insisted with a fierce determination. I can't lose Leo. I promised our mom I would always take care of him. Her eyes filled with tears. And I never break promises. At that moment, looking at this small girl with such a great responsibility, Caleb felt something awaken within him. It wasn't just compassion or indignation. It was a purpose. Since losing Mariana, he had lived like a ghost, doing the bare minimum to keep up appearances. But now, faced with such a clear injustice, some of the old energy that had driven him to build a tech empire from scratch began to pulse again. Luna, he said, gently holding the girl's small hands, I'm going to do everything I can to help you and Leo. That's a promise. Her eyes fixed on his, searching for any sign of a lie. Apparently she found none because she nodded solemnly. Thank you. No one has ever promised to help me before. Caleb's phone vibrated. It was Deborah sending the first results of her research. Worrying messages about previous complaints against the Southern Hope shelter, all dismissed for lack of evidence. Complaints from former employees about poor conditions. And, most alarmingly, a pattern of separating siblings, always with the justification of the best interest of the younger child. Caleb looked at Luna, who was now fighting sleep after the warm meal and bath. He realized he was at a crossroads. He could call the authorities, return Luna to the shelter, and try to act through official channels, risking losing contact with her and her brother completely. Or he could do something bolder, possibly illegal but potentially more effective. Luna, he called softly, helping her settle on the sofa with a blanket. Tomorrow we're going to get your brother, and no one is going to separate you. That's another promise. As the girl finally gave in to exhaustion, Caleb picked up the phone and dialed the number of Edward Miles, his trusted lawyer for over a decade. If he was about to challenge the system, he would need all the help he could get. And for the first time in months, he felt he had a real reason to fight. The rain outside began to subside, as if even the heavens acknowledged that something important was about to happen. Caleb Morgan, the man who had built an empire, was now preparing for his most important battle, a war against time, bureaucracy, and a seemingly corrupt system, all to keep a family that wasn't even his together. As he watched Luna sleep, a peace he hadn't felt in a long time enveloped him. Perhaps that fake hug was turning into something much more real than either of them could have imagined. Dawn found Caleb already awake, sitting in the armchair of the hotel room, watching Luna sleep on the sofa. The girl had a restless sleep, occasionally murmuring her brother's name. During the night, he had exchanged dozens of messages with Edward and Deborah, drafting a plan that walked the fine line between legal and necessary. Edward Miles arrived at 7 in the morning, bringing with him a folder of documents and the serious expression that characterized him. Tall, black, and always impeccably dressed, He was known in Seattle's legal circles as the strategist, a nickname he had earned for his ability to find legal loopholes where no one else could. Technically, what you did could be interpreted as kidnapping, Edward said after hearing the whole story. But considering the circumstances in your history, we can build a solid defense based on emergency humanitarian action. I don't care about the consequences for me, Caleb replied, keeping his voice low so as not to wake Luna. I just want to make sure those children aren't separated. And from what Deborah has discovered, it seems there's a lot more wrong with that shelter than just that. Edward nodded, flipping through printed reports. I managed to get access to some internal documents. In the last 3 years, the Southern Hope Shelter has received over $5 million in government funding and private donations. But the financial reports are vague about how the money was used. And there's a curious pattern. Older children are rarely adopted, even when there's initial interest from families. As if someone were sabotaging the adoptions, Caleb concluded. Exactly. And there's something even more intriguing. The shelter receives a monthly payment per child housed. The longer they stay, the more money comes in. And the more problematic they are classified as, the higher the payment. Caleb felt his stomach churn. They're profiting from their suffering. It's a possibility we need to investigate. Edward closed the folder. But right now we have a more immediate problem. Luna's brother is being given up for adoption today. If we want to prevent that legally, we need to act fast. A movement on the sofa caught their attention as Luna woke with a start. For a moment panic took over her face until her eyes met Caleb's. You're still here, she murmured, between relief and surprise. I promised I'd help you, didn't I? Caleb smiled, feeling a tenderness he hadn't experienced in a long time. This is my friend Edward. He's a lawyer and he's going to help us get Leo. Luna watched Edward with suspicion. In her short life, adults had rarely been a source of comfort. Hello, Luna, Edward said, maintaining a respectful distance. Caleb told me about your brother. We're working to make sure you two stay together. How? The question was simple, but loaded with hope and skepticism. Caleb and Edward exchanged glances. The truth was they didn't have a fully formed plan yet. Confronting the shelter directly could trigger a defensive reaction that would result in more bureaucracy and potentially a complete loss of access to the children. On the other hand, waiting for the legal process would mean watching Leo leave with his new family today. First, we need to better understand the situation, Edward replied diplomatically. Luna, can you tell us more about the shelter? About the people who work there, how they treat the children? Luna hesitated, her eyes downcast. If I tell, they'll put me in the basement room again. They will never do that to you again, Caleb promised, with a conviction that surprised him. We are here to protect you and Leo, but we need to know what we're up against. Something in his voice seemed to convince Luna. Ms. Campbell is in charge of everything. She smiles when there are visitors, but gets angry later. There's Mr. Clark, who's the night security guard. He takes the kids who cry too much to the basement room. She paused, shuddering. It's a dark place, no windows, just an old mattress on the floor. We stay there until we stop crying. And has Leo been taken there? Caleb asked, controlling the anger growing inside him. Luna nodded, her eyes welling up. 3 times. The last time was last week because he asked the couple who wants to adopt him about me. Ms. Campbell didn't like that. Edward made quick notes. Are other children also taken to this room? Yes, mostly the older ones, who already understand what's happening. Luna wiped away a tear. Ms. Campbell says we have to behave, otherwise no one will want us. Caleb felt his blood boil. The psychological manipulation was evident. Children already traumatized by abandonment were being punished for expressing perfectly normal emotions. Luna, Edward continued, gentle but firm, you mentioned the couple doesn't know about you. How are you so sure? I heard Ms. Campbell talking to the social worker, Tanya. She said it was better not to complicate Leo's adoption, that it was already hard to place a 5-year-old boy, and that I was damaged goods. Luna pronounced the last words carefully, as if repeating something she didn't fully understand. Caleb and Edward exchanged horrified glances. The dehumanization was even more blatant than they had suspected. Edward's phone rang. It was Deborah with urgent news. The couple interested in adopting Leo had arrived at the shelter early. The child's handover was being moved up. We have to go now, Edward announced already, gathering his documents. I'm filing for an emergency injunction citing evidence of administrative irregularities and possible mistreatment. It's not a permanent solution, but it might buy us a few days. Luna grabbed Caleb's hand. Are we going to get Leo? We are, he confirmed, helping her put on her new sneakers. But I need you to understand something. It might be difficult. The people at the shelter might get angry. But I won't let anyone hurt you or your brother. Do you trust me? Luna stared at him for a long moment, as if assessing the soul behind those eyes. Then she nodded solemnly. I trust you. The drive to the Southern Hope shelter, located in the Seattle metropolitan area, was tense. Caleb drove his Volvo XC90 with determination, while Edward finalized the injunction on his tablet and sent it electronically to the court. Luna remained silent in the back seat, looking out the window with a mixture of fear and hope. The shelter was an old, adapted mansion, painted a faded yellow that was meant to look cheerful, but only highlighted the structure's decay. A banner at the entrance proclaimed, Southern Hope, building futures with love. The irony did not go unnoticed by Caleb. In the parking lot, a couple in their 30s was loading suitcases into an SUV. Between them, a small boy with brown hair held a worn teddy bear. Even from a distance, the resemblance to Luna was undeniable. That's him, Luna whispered, already unbuckling her seatbelt. That's Leo. Caleb had to hold her back so she wouldn't jump out of the moving car. Calm down. Let's do this right. We don't want to scare him. They parked near the entrance. Edward adjusted his tie, preparing for the legal battle ahead. Caleb took a deep breath, seeking the calm that characterized him in the most difficult negotiations. Luna trembled slightly, torn between the anxiety of reuniting with her brother and the fear of returning to the place she so dreaded. At the reception, a middle-aged woman with hair rigidly pulled into a bun and smeared red lipstick greeted them with a commercial smile. Her name tag identified her, Judith Campbell, Administrative Director. How can I help you? Her tone was polite, but her eyes scanned the visitors with suspicion. When they landed on Luna, there was a flash of recognition followed by something close to panic. Luna, thank God you're all right. We were all so worried. The falseness was so blatant it made Caleb nauseous. Luna hid partially behind him, gripping his hand tightly. I'm Edward Miles, an attorney, Edward intervened, presenting his Bar Association ID. And this is my client, Caleb Morgan. We are here to discuss the situation of the minor Luna and her brother Leo. Ah, Judith seemed momentarily flustered. Well, Luna ran away yesterday, as you can see. As for Leo, I'm afraid it's too late. He is in the final process of adoption. In fact, his adoptive parents are here right now to pick him up. That's precisely what we came to discuss. Edward opened his folder. I have here an injunction issued by the family court, temporarily suspending any adoption process involving Leo Smith, based on evidence of administrative irregularities and potential negligence in the handling of the process. Judith's face turned pale. This is absurd. There are no irregularities. Leo's adoption process followed all legal procedures, including informing the adopters of the existence of a sister, Caleb asked, his voice controlled despite his rising anger. The separation of siblings is a difficult but sometimes necessary decision, Judith replied defensively. Leo has a better chance of being adopted alone. It's a matter of ensuring what's best for him. And what would be best for Luna? Caleb insisted. To lose the only family she has left? Before Judith could answer, the reception door opened. The couple Caleb had seen in the parking lot entered, accompanied by the boy Caleb now confirmed was Leo. The boy was small for his age, with the same large expressive eyes as Luna, though his were a lighter shade of brown. Leo! Luna couldn't contain herself. She broke free from Caleb and ran to her brother, wrapping him in a tight hug. Luna! The boy returned the hug with equal intensity, as if fearing she might disappear at any moment. You came back! They said you were gone. The couple watched the scene with evident confusion. Who is this girl? The woman asked, addressing Judith. The shelter director looked like she was about to have a nervous breakdown. Sandra Paul, this is Luna. She is a close friend of Leo's. She's my sister. Leo protested, still hugging Luna. My real sister. Sandra looked from Judith to the children, and then to Caleb and Edward, clearly trying to process the information. Sister. No one mentioned that Leo had a sister. That's precisely why we're here, Edward explained, approaching the couple. I introduce myself, Edward Miles, attorney, and I believe there has been a serious omission of information in Leo's adoption process. The man, Paul, frowned. What kind of omission? The fact that Leo has an older sister, Luna, from whom he would be permanently separated if the adoption proceeded as planned, Caleb replied, his voice calm despite the tension. And it seems you were not informed of this. The shocked expression on the couple's faces confirmed their suspicion. Sandra, a woman with delicate features and kind eyes, crouched down to the children's level. Leo, why didn't you tell me you had a sister? The boy cast a fearful glance at Judith before answering. Miss Campbell said I couldn't talk about Luna, that it was a secret. Otherwise you wouldn't want to take me. The childish sincerity fell like a bomb in the room. Sandra stood up, facing Judith with indignation. Is that true? You deliberately hid the fact that he had a sister. Judith stammered, looking for an out. Understand, Sandra, these are difficult decisions. The probability of joint adoption for siblings with this age difference is almost nil. We were trying to secure a future for Leo. At the expense of his and his sister's emotional well-being, Paul observed, visibly disturbed. He turned to Caleb. And you are... Caleb Morgan. Luna came to me yesterday, desperate, after running away from the shelter. She knew they were planning to hand Leo over today, without any mention of her existence. A hurried employee entered the reception, whispering something in Judith's ear. She turned even paler, casting a furious look at Caleb and Edward. It seems we have a bigger problem, she announced, trying to maintain her composure. I've just been informed that representatives from Child Protective Services and the Department of Social and Health Services are on their way, due to an anonymous tip about irregularities at our shelter. Caleb and Edward exchanged discreet glances. Deborah had done her part, alerting the proper authorities as planned. Judith continued, her voice trembling with restrained anger. This is an orchestrated conspiracy to defame our institution. The Southern Hope Shelter has decades of service to the community. If there's nothing to hide, there's no reason to worry, Edward replied calmly. A full audit will only confirm the integrity of your procedures, won't it? While the adults argued, Luna had approached Sandra and Paul, still holding her brother's hand. Please, she said, with a maturity that didn't match her 7 years, don't just take Leo, he has nightmares at night. Only I know how to calm him down. And he needs to sleep with the light on or he gets scared. Sandra looked on the verge of tears. Luna, we didn't know Leo had a sister. No one told us. Can we stay together? Luna's simple, direct question hung in the air, filled with hope. Before any answer could be given, the reception door opened again. 2 CPS caseworkers and a social worker entered. Accompanied by a reporter, Caleb immediately recognized Rebecca Torres, an investigative journalist for the Seattle Times, known for her reports on corruption and human rights. The presence of the press was clearly not in Judith's plans. She looked ready to faint. Ladies and gentlemen, this is a private meeting, she tried to argue. Actually, one of the caseworkers intervened, we are here in an official capacity to investigate allegations of administrative irregularities and potential violations of the rights of the children in this shelter. And the press's presence was authorized by the district attorney's office, considering the public interest in the case. Rebecca stepped forward, recorder in hand. Miss Campbell, could you comment on the allegations that children at this shelter are systematically punished in an isolated basement room for expressing normal emotions like sadness or homesickness? The panic in Judith's eyes was answer enough. That is slander. We have no punishment room. Yes, you do. Leo's small but firm voice surprised everyone. It's the grey room, where they put you if you cry too much or talk about family. Luna nodded, finding courage in her brother's presence. It's dark and cold. There's no window, just a mattress on the floor. Leo was put there last week because he asked about me. The caseworkers exchanged alarmed glances. We need to see this room now, one of them demanded. And also all financial and administrative records from the last 5 years, the other added. Judith seemed cornered. Her gaze wandered around the room, as if looking for an escape. For a moment, Caleb feared she might do something drastic. But then her shoulders slumped in defeat. It's all in the files, she murmured. But you won't understand. These are necessary decisions to keep the shelter running. As the caseworkers and social worker led Judith to her office, Rebecca approached Caleb. Caleb Morgan, right? From Omnicorp? What brings you to this case? Caleb hesitated, aware that any statement he made could further complicate the already delicate situation. But before he could answer, he felt a small hand take his. Luna had positioned herself by his side along with Leo. He helped me, Luna said simply, when no one else would listen. Rebecca studied the scene with eyes trained to detect human stories behind facades. It seems there's much more to this story than meets the eye, she commented, turning off her recorder in a gesture of trust. I'd like to hear all the details when it's appropriate. Meanwhile, Sandra and Paul remained in a corner, visibly shaken by the turn of events. Caleb realized that the dream of a family they had built was crumbling before their eyes. An adoption that should have been a cause for celebration had turned into an ethical and emotional nightmare. He approached them, guided by an impulse he couldn't explain. I'm sorry you were dragged into this, he said sincerely. You seem like good people who genuinely want to offer a home to a child. Sandra wiped away a tear. We tried for 5 years to have children. After 3 miscarriages, we decided adoption was our path. We spent 2 years on the waiting list, doing all the prep courses, the psychological evaluations, adapting our home. And now, Paul asked, hugging his wife, what happens? Caleb looked at the children, who were playing together in a corner of the room as if trying to make up for lost time in just a few minutes. The connection between them was palpable, transcending the chaotic circumstances around them. I don't know what happens now, he admitted honestly. But I know that those 2 children need to stay together. And I also know they need a stable home with people who truly care. A glimmer of understanding appeared in Sandra's eyes. Are you suggesting that... I'm not suggesting anything, Caleb smiled slightly. Just observing that there are many different kinds of families in the world. At that moment, Edward returned from the room where the caseworkers were meeting with Judith. His expression was grave, but there was a spark of hope in his eyes. Things are getting interesting, he reported. The caseworkers found preliminary evidence of various irregularities. It seems the anonymous tip included the exact location of compromising documents. Deborah is as efficient as ever, Caleb commented, allowing himself a small smile. Most importantly, Leo's adoption is officially suspended pending the investigation, Edward continued, and the caseworkers are recommending that both children be temporarily relocated to another environment, considering the evidence of inadequate treatment. Relocated where? Caleb asked, feeling an inexplicable tightness in his chest. That's the problem. The system is overwhelmed. The nearest shelter with available spots is in Tacoma, almost 2 hours from here. And there's no guarantee they could keep the siblings together even there. Caleb felt the weight of reality fall on his shoulders. He had managed to stop Leo from being adopted without Luna's existence being known. He had helped expose the irregularities at the Southern Hope shelter, but he still hadn't secured a safe future for the children. It was Sandra who broke the silence. What if... She hesitated, exchanging a significant look with her husband, who nodded in silent support. What if we requested temporary custody of both of them? Paul and I have all the approved requirements for adoption. Our house has space, and we could give the authorities time to decide the best path, without separating them. The proposal caught everyone by surprise, especially Caleb. For some reason he couldn't name. He felt a contradictory mix of relief and reluctance. He was genuinely happy that Luna and Leo had a chance to stay together, but the idea of them leaving so quickly caused an unexpected emptiness. That would be extraordinarily generous, Edward replied, recovering from the surprise first. It would have to be discussed with the caseworkers, of course, but considering you already have an approved adoption process for Leo, there are precedents that would support a joint temporary custody request. As the adults discussed the practical aspects of the proposal, Luna quietly approached Caleb, tugging on the hem of his coat to get his attention. Uncle Caleb, she whispered, calling him that for the first time. Do that lady and that man want to take us to their house? Caleb crouched to her level. It seems so. They want to take care of you and Leo together. What do you think of that? Luna bit her lip, thoughtful. They seem nice. Leo liked them. Then her large eyes met Caleb's, with a vulnerability that broke his heart. But I wanted to know if we'll still get to see you. You promised you would help us. The simplicity of the question hit him like a wave. In less than 24 hours, that little girl had infiltrated his life and, in some inexplicable way, had begun to fill the void that had consumed him since Mariana's departure. Luna, he replied, feeling a lump in his throat, I will always be around to help you guys. That's a promise I don't intend to break. Her lips curved into a small smile, the first genuinely carefree one Caleb had seen on her face. Okay, because you're good at hugs, even the fake ones. At that moment, as the administrative and legal chaos unfolded around them, Caleb felt something awaken within him. It was not just compassion or a sense of justice. It was something deeper, more primitive and at the same time more elevated. An instinct to protect that transcended reason or logic. And as he watched Luna return to her brother, he understood that the fake hug had become the beginning of something very real. Something that perhaps could redefine not only the future of those children, but also his own. 3 weeks had passed since the tumultuous day at the Southern Hope Shelter. 3 weeks of depositions, hearings, investigative reports, and a growing media storm around what the press now called the shelter scandal. The complaint that began with Southern Hope had expanded, revealing a web of irregularities in several similar institutions across Washington. Caleb watched the developments from his penthouse in downtown Seattle, partially removed from the front lines, but never completely disconnected. Edward led the legal aspects. Rebecca Torres conducted the journalistic coverage, and Deborah coordinated an investigative task force using Omnicor's resources to map financial connections between the suspect shelters and public and private entities. Meanwhile, Luna and Leo had been temporarily placed with Sandra and Paul Olson, the couple who had originally planned to adopt only Leo. The adjustment wasn't easy. Luna, especially, carried emotional scars that made it difficult to trust new adults. But the Olsons showed admirable patience and dedication. Caleb visited the children regularly, always with modest gifts and stories to tell. Gradually, a routine was established. On Sundays, he would take them both for walks in Discovery Park or the Washington Park Arboretum. On Wednesdays, they would have dinner together at the Olsons' house, where Leo would show off his new drawings and Luna would recount with growing eloquence her days at the school she now attended. It was on a rainy Wednesday that Edward's phone call interrupted the peaceful routine that was beginning to take hold. His usually calm voice carried an unusual urgency. "We have a problem," he announced. "Judge Veronica Palmer has taken over the main case involving the Southern Hope Shelter." Caleb felt a chill down his spine. Veronica Palmer was known in legal circles for her extreme conservatism and strict interpretation of adoption laws. More importantly, she was publicly linked to religious organizations that partnered with several of the shelters under investigation. "Has she made any decisions yet?" Caleb asked, dreading the answer. "Not yet. But she's requested a full review of all preliminary measures, including the temporary custody granted to the Olsons." Edward paused significantly. "And there are rumors that she considers it inappropriate for children in such a delicate situation to be exposed to constant visits from third parties with no family ties." The implication was clear. Caleb's visits were being questioned. "What can we do?" "For now, act with caution. The review hearing is set for next week. The Olsons will be heard, as will representatives from Child Protective Services." Edward hesitated. "It would be wise to reduce your visits until then. We don't want to give ammunition to those who want to use the children as pawns in this bigger game." Caleb nodded, even though he knew Edward couldn't see him over the phone. The suggestion made sense from a strategic point of view, but the idea of staying away from Luna and Leo, even temporarily, caused a pain he didn't expect to feel. "There's one more thing," Edward continued. "Rebecca has discovered connections between Judith Campbell and important figures in the state government. Some of these names are linked to an organization called Family First, which apparently funds several shelters across the state. What's the problem with that?" "The problem is that these same shelters have a curious pattern. They prioritize international adoptions and frequently separate siblings, especially when one of them is under 6 years old." The information hit Caleb like a punch. Leo was exactly 5 years old. "Are you suggesting there was a bigger plan behind the specific separation of Luna and Leo?" "I'm not asserting anything yet, But the patterns are intriguing. And Rebecca found records of several children, all with the same profile as Leo. Between 4 and 6 years old, no health problems, adopted by foreign families through curiously expedited processes. And the older siblings? They remained in the shelters. Some were eventually adopted domestically, others simply aged out of the system. Caleb felt his stomach turn. We need concrete proof. Documents, testimonies, anything that connects these dots. We're working on it. Deborah managed to get access to some email servers through unconventional methods. Edward chose his words carefully. We need to act fast but discreetly. If these connections are as powerful as they seem, the backlash could be proportional. After hanging up, Caleb remained motionless in his penthouse office, watching the rain lash against the windows. His life had changed completely in just 3 weeks. The pain of Mariana's loss was still there, a ghost that inhabited the silent corners of his existence. But now there was something more, something that pulled him out of his grief and forced him to reconnect with the world. His phone vibrated again. It was a message from Sandra Olsen with a photo attached. In the image, Leo and Luna smiled in front of a crudely decorated homemade cake, with the phrase, "Thank you, Uncle Caleb," written in frosting. The message read, "They insisted on making something special for you tomorrow. I know you're busy, but they're counting the minutes." Caleb felt an emotion he couldn't name. He looked at the photo for long minutes, absorbing every detail of the smiling faces that, in some mysterious way, had become so important to him. Edward's advice made sense from a legal standpoint, but there were other considerations. Luna had already faced too much abandonment in her short life. If Caleb simply stopped visiting them without explanation, how would she interpret that? As yet another confirmation that adults were not to be trusted, that bonds were easily disposable. His decision was made almost instantly. He replied to Sandra, "Wouldn't miss it for the world. I'll be there at 7. The next day, as he drove to the Olsens' house in the Bellevue area, Caleb reflected on recent events. The investigation into the Southern Hope shelter had revealed layers of corruption much deeper than they had initially suspected. Judith Campbell had been removed from her position, but remained free while the case proceeded. Employees began to talk, revealing systemic abusive practices, like the punishment room in the basement, and manipulations of the children's adoptability records. Most disturbing were the signs of a much larger scheme, involving several shelters across the state, and possibly the authorities who were supposed to be overseeing them. The reporter, Rebecca Torres, had discovered suspicious patterns of accelerated international adoptions, always involving young children, often separated from older siblings. In all cases, the adoptive families were foreign and paid exorbitant facilitation fees to intermediaries who, in turn, had connections with the shelter administrators. The Olsens' house was a modern 2-story home on a quiet street. Paul was a civil engineer, Sandra a university professor, an upper-middle-class couple with the financial and emotional stability to offer the children. As he parked in front, Caleb noticed the living room curtains move, and soon Leo's eager face appeared in the window. Before he could even ring the doorbell, the door flew open, and 2 children launched themselves at him. Leo grabbed his legs, while Luna, more restrained but equally enthusiastic, waited her turn for a hug. "You really came," Leo exclaimed, with the genuine surprise of someone who still doesn't fully believe in the constancy of good things. "Of course I came." "A promise is a promise," Caleb replied, ruffling the boy's hair. Luna watched him with her perceptive eyes. "You look tired." "A little," he admitted, always honest with the children. "Too much work." Sandra appeared at the door, wiping her hands on a kitchen apron. "Come in, the rain's picking up." "Kids, let Caleb breathe." The house exuded a delicious aroma of home-cooked food, and a warmth that went beyond the ambient temperature. In the corners of the living room, evidence of the children's new life. Leo's drawings tacked to the refrigerator, children's books scattered on the coffee table, a small pink coat belonging to Luna hanging on the coat rack. "Come see the cake we made." Leo pulled Caleb by the hand towards the kitchen. Aunt Sandra helped, but Luna and I did almost everything. On the kitchen table was the same cake from the photo, now with a single candle in the center. It was no one's birthday, but the children had insisted on the candle as a festive element. "It's to say thank you," Luna explained, suddenly shy, "for helping us stay together." The simplicity of the gesture hit Caleb hard. He felt his throat tighten as the children sang a makeshift version of Happy Birthday to You, replacing the traditional lyrics with Thank You to You. Dinner proceeded in an atmosphere of almost surreal normality, considering the extraordinary circumstances that had brought these people together. Paul, recently home from work, told funny stories about the construction site he was supervising. Sandra talked about her university students. Leo enthusiastically described his day at his new school. Luna, always more observant, absorbed everything with attentive eyes. It was only after the children had gone to bed that the adults could talk openly. How are they really adjusting? Caleb asked, accepting the cup of coffee Sandra offered. The couple exchanged glances. Leo adapts more easily, Paul replied. He's younger, more malleable. Luna. He hesitated. Luna carries more memories, Sandra completed. She has nightmares almost every night. Sometimes she just watches the doors and windows, as if expecting someone to come take her back to the shelter. She also has moments of panic when Leo is out of her sight for too long, Paul added. The psychologist says it's normal, considering what they've been through, but that it will take time and consistency for her to build trust. Caleb nodded thoughtfully. Edward called me yesterday. There are complications with the case. He explained about Judge Palmer taking over the case and her potential ties to organizations connected to the investigated shelters. He also mentioned the discoveries about the possible international adoption scheme. So you think Leo was a target? Sandra's voice trembled slightly. It's a possibility we're investigating, Caleb replied carefully. He fits the profile, ideal age, no health problems, an appearance that meets certain preferential standards. And Luna would have been left behind, Paul concluded, his face contorted in indignation, like unsold stock. My God. That's why we need to be cautious, Caleb continued. Edward suggested I reduce my visits until the hearing with Judge Palmer, to avoid giving the impression of external interference in the children's adjustment process. Sandra frowned. That would break their hearts, especially Luna's. She talks about you all the time, you know. Yesterday she told me that when she grows up, she wants to work with computers just like Uncle Caleb. The comment sent a wave of warmth through Caleb's chest. I don't intend to disappear. We just thought it might be better to be discreet for a while. Fewer public visits, perhaps. I understand the concern, Paul said, but I also understand what these children have already lost in their lives. Another loss, even a temporary one, could be devastating to the progress they've made. The conversation was interrupted by a sharp scream from upstairs. The three adults stood up simultaneously, but it was Caleb who reached the children's room first. Luna was sitting up in bed, gasping, her face wet with tears. Leo, awakened by his sister's scream, was already by her side, holding her hand. The dark room, Luna murmured, still caught in the grip of the nightmare. They were taking Leo to the dark room. Caleb approached carefully, sitting on the edge of the bed. It was just a bad dream, Luna. Leo is here, see? You're both safe. Her eyes met his, gradually recognizing reality. Uncle Caleb. Then without warning, she threw herself into his arms, sobbing against his chest. Sandra and Paul watched from the doorway, respecting the moment. There was something profoundly right in the way Luna sought comfort in Caleb, as if the bond between them transcended the short time they had known each other. No one is going to hurt you, Caleb promised, hugging Luna while extending his other arm to include Leo. No one is going to separate you. I won't let them. The words came out spontaneously, but as soon as he said them, Caleb realized the magnitude of the promise he had just made. It wasn't just a momentary comfort to soothe a nightmare. It was a commitment that he realized he was willing to keep at any cost. Later, after the children had gone back to sleep, the three adults resumed their conversation in the living room, now with a new perspective. What are we going to do about the hearing? Paul asked. We will face it with the truth, Caleb replied with renewed determination. You are the temporary legal guardians, and you are doing an exemplary job. The children are safe, healthy, attending school and therapy. There is no legal basis for any interference. And what about you? Sandra questioned. Your connection with the children is unusual from a legal point of view. Caleb reflected for a moment. I think we need to formalize my participation in their lives. Perhaps as an official godfather? Edward will know the best legal approach. The idea of a formal bond with Luna and Leo had not occurred to Caleb until that moment, but as soon as the words left his mouth, he knew it was the right path. Since that first fake hug on the rainy sidewalk, something had fundamentally changed in his life. The void left by Mariana would never be completely filled, but a new purpose had emerged. In the days that followed, the investigation took on new dimensions. Deborah and her team discovered compromising email exchanges between Judith Campbell and representatives of the Family First organization. The documents clearly revealed a system for classifying children based on international adoptability, with an emphasis on separating siblings when the youngest met specific criteria. Even more alarming, messages exchanged between Judith and Judge Veronica Palmer suggested a relationship that went beyond professional. In one of the emails, the judge explicitly discussed how to facilitate certain international adoptions, mentioning adequate compensation for all involved. Rebecca Torres, armed with this evidence, was preparing an explosive report that promised to shake the foundations of the adoption system in Washington. But before she could publish it, unexpected events changed the course of the story. On the eve of the hearing with Judge Palmer, Caleb received a surprising visit at his Omnicorps office. Tanya Rogers, the social worker who had worked at the Southern Hope Shelter under Judith, appeared visibly nervous, asking to speak in private. "I don't have much time," she said, refusing to sit. "They found out I leaked documents to your team. They're planning to have me suspended and possibly file a lawsuit for breach of confidentiality." "Who are they?" Caleb asked, alarmed. "The organization. Family First is just the public facade. Behind it there are powerful people, politicians, businessmen, religious figures. They form a network that not only controls the shelters but has influence in clerks' offices, courts, even in sectors of the police." Caleb felt a chill. "Why are you telling me this now?" "Mostly because they know you've uncovered part of the scheme, and they're preparing a counterattack." Tanya seemed genuinely frightened. "Tomorrow's hearing is a trap. Judge Palmer not only intends to reverse the children's temporary custody, but she has a suitable couple already prepared to receive Leo. A foreign couple. And Luna. Those Hephides, she would go back into the system. She would probably be transferred to a shelter in a more rural area, where she would have less visibility. The idea was so abominable that Caleb had to restrain himself from screaming in anger. How can they do that? There are ongoing investigations, substantial evidence of irregularities. That's exactly why, Tanya replied. They're desperate to cover up the case. If the children are relocated, if you're kept away from them, it will be harder to sustain the public narrative, especially if Leo is sent abroad. "I won't allow that," Caleb stated, with a determination that surprised even himself. "It won't be easy to face them. They have resources, influence, and they won't hesitate to use dirty tactics. They're already gathering information about you, trying to find vulnerabilities," Caleb thought quickly. "Why are you helping me?" "You worked for them." Tanya's eyes filled with restrained tears. "I didn't get into this work to hurt children. I believed I was helping. When I started to realize what was really happening, I tried to ignore it, to convince myself they were just isolated cases." She took a painful pause. "Then I met Luna and Leo. I saw how inseparable they were, how she protected him. And still I followed orders. I helped hide her existence from the adopters." The remorse in her voice was palpable. "I can't change what I did, but I can try to stop it from happening again. There are other children, other siblings about to be separated." Caleb nodded, recognizing the courage required for that confession. "We need you as an official witness." "They would destroy me," Tanya replied, her fear evident. "Not if we act first and fast." Caleb picked up the phone, dialing Edward. "My lawyer can prepare a formal deposition today. With your evidence, and what we've already collected, we can request Judge Palmer's immediate recusal for conflict of interest." While explaining the situation to Edward on the phone, Caleb watched Tanya, who seemed simultaneously terrified and relieved to finally be telling the truth. When he hung up, she had made her decision. "I'll testify," she said simply. "At least then I'll be able to look myself in the mirror again." The following hours were a whirlwind of activity. Edward contacted connections in the district attorney's office, presenting preliminary evidence that justified an urgent investigation into Judge Palmer. Rebecca Torres, informed of the new developments, prepared a special report to be strategically published before the hearing. Deborah mobilized technological resources to protect the servers containing evidence, creating secure backups in inaccessible locations. And Caleb, moved by an instinct he didn't know he possessed, made a decision that would permanently change the course of events. After consulting with Edward about the legal implications, he called Sandra and Paul, proposing an urgent meeting. That night, in the Olsons' living room, while the children slept upstairs, Caleb presented an idea that had been germinating in his subconscious for weeks, but which only now, in the face of the imminent threat, had crystallized into an absolute certainty. "I want to file for joint adoption of Luna and Leo," he announced, surprising even himself with the firmness in his voice. Sandra and Paul exchanged looks of astonishment. "You want to adopt them?" Sandra asked, processing the information. "Both of them?" "Yes, and I would like to have your support." "But," Paul seemed confused, "I thought we were moving towards adopting them ourselves. We have temporary custody, we're building a bond." "And you will continue to be a fundamental part of their lives," Caleb assured him. "I'm not proposing to exclude you. On the contrary." He then explained what he had discovered about the next day's hearing, about the plans to separate the children again, about the larger scheme aimed at profiting from international adoptions. "The judge already has a plan ready to reverse your custody," he concluded. "But she won't be expecting me to file a formal adoption petition, especially if it's backed by evidence of a significant existing bond." "And is there?" Sandra asked without judgment, just seeking clarity. Caleb hesitated, thinking how to answer. "When Mariana passed, I thought I would never feel anything but pain again, that I was condemned to exist, not to live. Then Luna appeared, asking for a fake hug. A sad smile touched his lips. But there's nothing fake about what I feel for these children now. They brought me back to life." The silence that followed was heavy with unsaid emotions. It was Paul who finally spoke, his voice choked with emotion. "We've grown attached to them too. The idea of losing them to the system again is unbearable. That's why I'm proposing something unconventional," Caleb continued. "A shared adoption in practice, if not in law. I would be the legal adopter, but you would remain present as an extended family, as official godparents, with guaranteed visitation rights and participation." "Is that legally possible?" Sandra questioned, already mentally calculating the implications. "Edward is checking the details. It wouldn't be a joint adoption in the traditional sense, since we're not a couple. But we can establish parallel legal agreements that guarantee your co-parenting rights." Paul seemed skeptical. "Why do you think you'd have a better chance of getting the adoption than we would?" The question was valid, and Caleb appreciated the honesty. "Resources," he answered simply. "Not just financial, but influence. I have an established tech company, political connections, access to the press. If this organization is as powerful as it seems, we need all the firepower we can get. And what if even that isn't enough?" Sandra verbalized the fear hanging in the room. Caleb took a deep breath. "I have a plan B. It's not completely legal, and I'd rather not share all the details to protect you. But it involves ensuring the children don't fall back into the hands of this organization at any cost." The determination in his voice made it clear he wasn't bluffing. Another moment of reflective silence followed as the couple processed the proposal. "We need to think about the children," Sandra finally said. "About what would be best for them." "Luna trusts you in a way I've never seen," Paul observed. "There's something special about your bond. Maybe because you were the one who rescued her initially." "And Leo adores you," Sandra added. "He draws the three of you together all the time, you know. You, him, and Luna like a family." The revelation hit Caleb with unexpected force. "I didn't know." Paul got up and went to a desk drawer. He returned with several children's drawings. In all of them, 3 stick figures, 1 tall and 2 small, appeared holding hands, under smiling suns and colorful houses. "He wrote our family on this one," Sandra pointed out, showing shaky letters at the top of one of the drawings. Caleb felt a lump in his throat. He was proposing adoption as a strategic measure to protect the children. But those drawings revealed that for Leo, at least, the idea of family already naturally included Caleb. "We need to talk to them," Paul concluded. "Explain the options within what they can understand and hear what they think." "I agree," Caleb replied, "but we need to do it before tomorrow's hearing. If Judge Palmer manages to reverse your custody, we'll lose access to the children. A sound on the stairs caught the attention of all three. Luna was standing on the first step. A cloth doll clutched to her chest, her eyes wide and attentive. "Luna," Sandra approached gently. "How long have you been there, sweetie?" "You're talking about us," the girl answered, with the perceptiveness that always surprised the adults. "About who's going to get us?" Caleb's heart ached. He didn't want her to find out like this, hearing fragments of a conversation that could be misinterpreted. "Come here," he called, holding out his hand. Luna hesitated for just a second before crossing the room and climbing onto the sofa next to him. "We're talking about how to make sure you and Leo always stay together and safe." "Is that mean lady going to take us away?" The direct question revealed that Luna had heard more of the conversation than they had imagined. "We're not going to let that happen," Caleb assured her. "Never." Luna studied his face with those eyes that seemed to see beyond words. "Do you want to be our dad?" The question, so simple and so complex at the same time, left Caleb momentarily speechless. It was the first time the idea had been put in such direct terms. He hesitated, searching for honesty. "I think so, Luna. I think I really want to be your dad, if you'll have me. And Aunt Sandra and Uncle Paul. They would always be part of your lives, like a big family." Luna seemed to ponder the information, processing the implications with a maturity impressive for her 7 years. "Would it be like having 3 houses?" she finally asked. "Yours, theirs, and our new one." Caleb smiled at the shrewdness of the question. "Something like that. It would be different from most families, but no less real for it." "I like different," Luna declared with surprising conviction. "Normal never really worked for me and Leo anyway." The simplicity of the answer brought tears to the eyes of the 3 adults in the room. Somehow this child who had suffered so much already understood that family is not defined by conventions, but by love and protection. "I'll tell Leo tomorrow," Luna decided, already getting up. "He'll like it. He loves you." Then, as if an afterthought, she added, "Me too." As Luna went back up the stairs to her room, the 3 adults remained in silence, each absorbing the weight of that seemingly simple but profoundly transformative moment. "I think we have our answer," Sandra finally said, wiping away a tear. Paul nodded. "We'll support your adoption petition, Caleb, and we'll do whatever it takes to ensure those children never suffer again." That night, as he drove back to his apartment, Caleb reflected on how his life had changed in such a short time. The grief that had consumed him for months had given way to a purpose greater than himself. The pain hadn't disappeared, it never completely would, but now it shared space with hope. Tomorrow they would face Judge Palmer and the dark forces trying to manipulate the system for their own benefit. It would be just the beginning of a larger battle, Caleb knew. But for the first time since losing Mariana, he felt truly alive, and ready to fight with all his strength for the future of these 2 children who, without warning or planning, had become the family he didn't know he could still have. The Seattle Justice Center was an imposing building downtown, with marble columns that seemed to support not just the physical structure, but the very concept of justice. On that winter morning, as the sun timidly tried to break through the characteristic Pacific Northwest mist, the building hosted a case that, although involving only 2 children, was beginning to reveal a web of corruption that stretched throughout the state's shelter system. Caleb arrived early, accompanied by Edward and Deborah. They had spent the night preparing documents, reviewing strategies and anticipating possible obstacles. Tanya Rogers, the social worker who had decided to break her silence, would meet them directly in the courtroom, escorted by an investigator from the district attorney's office who had taken over her protection. In the parking garage, they found Sandra and Paul arriving with Luna and Leo. The children were dressed formally, Leo in a white shirt and dress pants that seemed slightly too big, Luna in a navy blue dress with a white sash in her hair. They looked like little adults trying to behave in a manner befitting the seriousness of the situation. "Remember what we talked about?" Sandra crouched down, adjusting Leo's bow tie. "You just need to answer the judge's questions truthfully. You don't need to be afraid." Leo nodded solemnly, but his eyes constantly sought Luna, as if needing his sister's approval to be sure he was doing the right thing. Luna, for her part, maintained her composure with a dignity that didn't match her 7 years. Her eyes fixed on Caleb, as if drawing strength from his presence. "Good morning," Caleb greeted, trying to keep a light tone despite the tension. "You both look very elegant." "Aunt Sandra said we need to look respectable," Luna explained, pronouncing the word carefully. "So the judge sees we're good kids." The simplicity of the explanation hit Caleb like a punch. Children shouldn't have to look good to deserve a home, a family, the right to stay together. "You are wonderful kids," he replied, crouching to their level. "No matter what happens in there, always remember that." Leo threw himself into his arms, with the abandon characteristic of small children. Luna, more restrained, waited her turn, but when she finally allowed herself to be hugged, she clung to Caleb with an intensity that communicated all her unspoken fears. "I won't let anyone separate you," Caleb promised in a low voice. "Never." They entered the Justice Center as a united group, attracting curious glances from employees and others awaiting their own hearings. It wasn't common to see a well-known businessman like Caleb Morgan, a renowned lawyer like Edward Miles, and an ordinary couple accompanying two visibly tense children. In the antechamber of Judge Veronica Palmer's courtroom, they found Rebecca Torres talking quietly with an older woman Caleb didn't immediately recognize. "This is Ms. Mara Silver," Rebecca introduced, "Deputy District Attorney for the Family Justice Division. I managed to get in touch with her last night after we spoke." Mara Silver was a middle-aged black woman with short gray hair and penetrating eyes that seemed to assess everyone and everything around her. Her posture communicated authority and experience. "Mr. Morgan," she extended her hand, "Ms. Torres showed me some rather disturbing evidence. If confirmed, we are dealing with a case that goes far beyond the custody of these two children." "That's exactly what we fear," Edward confirmed, joining the conversation. "And we believe that Judge Palmer is not only aware but is an active part of the scheme." Ms. Silver nodded gravely. "That's why I'm here. I wouldn't normally get personally involved at this stage of the process, but given the circumstances, let's just say I prefer to witness the proceedings with my own eyes." The prosecutor's unexpected presence was a positive development, but Caleb knew the battle would still be tough. Judge Palmer had a reputation for being ruthless, and if their suspicions were correct, had personal interest in the case. "Caleb," Deborah called, approaching quickly. "I just got a message. Tanya can't make it. She was hospitalized overnight with an emergency." "What? What do you mean?" "Apparently severe food poisoning. She's stable, but the doctors are keeping her for observation." The coincidence was suspiciously convenient. "Can you confirm that's really what it is? And not some kind of interference?" Deborah nodded, already typing on her tablet. "I'm checking with my contacts at the hospital, but this certainly weakens our position without her testimony." The courtroom door opened, and a clerk announced that Judge Palmer was ready to see them. Caleb felt Luna squeeze his hand tighter, while Leo hid partially behind Paul's legs. The courtroom was smaller and more informal than those depicted in movies, but no less intimidating. Judge Veronica Palmer was already seated at her elevated bench, watching the group enter with cold eyes. She was a woman of about 60, with brown hair streaked with gray pulled back into a rigid bun, and thin lips permanently pursed in an expression of disapproval. To Caleb's surprise, Judith Campbell, the former director of the Southern Hope Shelter, was seated on one side of the room, accompanied by a man in an expensive suit who was presumably her lawyer. Next to them, a middle-aged couple with a foreign appearance watched the group with polite curiosity. "I note the presence of the temporary guardians, Sandra and Paul Olson," the judge announced, consulting her documents. "Mr. Caleb Morgan, who I understand has no legal relation to the case but has requested to be present, the children, Luna and Leo Smith." And she raised her eyebrows upon noticing Ms. Silver, Deputy DA Silver. "I wasn't expecting your presence today. The case has taken on dimensions that justify my direct participation." "Your Honor," the prosecutor replied calmly, taking her designated seat. The judge seemed momentarily annoyed but quickly regained her composure. "Very well. We also have present Ms. Judith Campbell, former director of the Southern Hope Shelter, invited to clarify some points, and Mr. and Mrs. Richard and Elizabeth Hartman, who had initiated the adoption process for the minor Leo before the recent incidents. The names and the presence of the foreign couple confirmed Caleb's suspicions. This was not a simple review of temporary custody. It was an orchestrated attempt to regain control of the situation and proceed with the original plan to separate the children. Edward realized the same thing, leaning in to whisper in Caleb's ear, "They're prepared. They already have the adoptive couple here, ready to take Leo." The hearing began with Judge Palmer reviewing the events that led to the Olsons' temporary custody. Her narrative, however, downplayed the irregularities discovered at the Southern Hope Shelter and characterized Luna's escape and Caleb's interference as disruptions to a legitimate adoption process that was underway. "What concerns me," the judge continued, "is that hasty decisions were made based on unproven accusations against a reputable institution. And even more concerning is the interference of a third party with no family or legal ties to the children." Her cold gaze landed on Caleb, who maintained a neutral expression despite his growing indignation. Mr. and Mrs. Hartman had completed all the legal requirements for the international adoption of the minor Leo, the judge proceeded, a process that was abruptly interrupted due to allegations that to date have not been substantiated by concrete evidence. "With all due respect, Your Honor," Edward intervened, standing up, "there is numerous documentary and testimonial evidence that has been presented to the District Attorney's Office, proving not only administrative irregularities at the Southern Hope Shelter, but potential crimes such as mistreatment, falsification of documents, and most seriously, the deliberate omission of Luna's existence in her brother's adoption process." The judge made a dismissive gesture. "I'm aware of the allegations, Mr. Miles. What I don't see is concrete proof. The main witness, social worker Tanya Rogers, was apparently unable to attend today." Due to a sudden hospitalization on the eve of this hearing, Caleb pointed out, unable to contain himself, "a coincidence that, at the very least, warrants investigation." The judge shot him a severe look. "Mr. Morgan, I would appreciate it if you would speak only when asked." Ms. Mara Silver intervened at this point. "Your Honor, the District Attorney's Office received a substantial set of documents last night that require careful analysis before any decision about the future of these children is made." "What documents would those be, Ms. Silver?" The irritation in the judge's voice was evident. "Emails, financial records, and depositions from former employees that suggest the existence of an organized scheme involving several shelters, including Southern Hope. A scheme that apparently prioritizes specific international adoptions over the best interests of the children." The prosecutor paused significantly. "Documents that explicitly mention the purposeful separation of siblings to facilitate more profitable adoptions." A tense silence fell over the room. Judith Campbell shifted uncomfortably in her chair. The Hartman couple exchanged confused glances, apparently not fully understanding the conversation in English, despite the presence of an interpreter by their side. "These are extremely serious allegations," the judge finally responded, "and they would need to be carefully verified before influencing any decision in this specific case." "I fully agree," replied Ms. Silver. "That is why the District Attorney's Office formally requests a 30-day postponement of this hearing, so that we may conduct a proper investigation." The judge seemed about to object when Edward added, "Furthermore, Your Honor, my client, Mr. Caleb Morgan, would like to formally file a petition for the adoption of the minors, Luna and Leo Smith." This declaration caused a stir in the room. Judge Palmer seemed genuinely surprised, while Judith Campbell whispered furiously with her lawyer. "Mr. Morgan," the judge recovered quickly, "I understand you have known these children for less than a month. This is a hasty decision, to say the least." "I don't see how," Caleb replied calmly. "I have already demonstrated a genuine commitment to the well-being of Luna and Leo. I have the resources and stability to offer them a safe home. And more importantly, I have a sincere desire to keep them together, as the siblings they are. There are procedures, Mr. Morgan. Psychological evaluations, home visits, monitored cohabitation periods. You cannot simply decide you want to adopt 2 children and expect the system to bend to your will." "Actually," Edward intervened, "we have already initiated all formal procedures. The adoption petition was filed yesterday, with all the necessary preliminary documentation. My client is fully aware of the steps to be followed and is willing to comply with them rigorously." The judge seemed increasingly irritated by the unexpected turns of the hearing. "And what about Mr. and Mrs. Olson? As far as I know, they also expressed interest in possibly adopting both children." Paul stood up. "Your Honor, my wife and I fully support Mr. Morgan's petition. In fact, we formally request to be considered as legal godparents to the children, maintaining regular co-parenting rights." "This is highly unconventional," the judge commented, visibly trying to find a way to regain control of the situation. It was at this moment that Luna, who had been observing everything with extraordinary attention for her age, stood up from her chair. "Your Honor," she said in a small but firm voice, "may I speak?" The entire room seemed to hold its breath. Technically, the judge was not obligated to listen to such a young child, but to publicly refuse her, especially with the prosecutor present, would be a risky political move. "You may speak, Luna," the judge finally conceded, but briefly. Luna walked to the center of the room, her hands clasped in front of her in a nervous gesture. Leo watched his sister with a mixture of admiration and apprehension. "Before the shelter, Leo and I lived with our grandma," she began. "When she got too sick and couldn't take care of us anymore, she promised that someone good would find us, that we just had to wait and stay together." Her childish voice, laden with a maturity forced by circumstance, echoed in the silent room. "In the first shelter in Spokane, they let us stay together, but then it closed and we went to Southern Hope. There Ms. Campbell said I was too old, that nobody would want to adopt me, and that Leo had a better chance alone." Luna glanced briefly at Judith, who looked away, unable to meet the child's accusing gaze. "When I found out they were going to take Leo away without me, I ran away to get help. That's when I met Uncle Caleb." Luna smiled slightly when she mentioned Caleb. "He helped me, even though he didn't know me. He didn't let them send me back to the dark place." The dark place, the punishment room that several children had mentioned in depositions collected by the investigation team. "Now," Luna continued, "me, Leo, Uncle Caleb, Aunt Sandra, and Uncle Paul are like a big family. Different, but good." She faced the judge directly. "Please don't separate us again. Leo has nightmares when he's away from me, and I promised our grandma I would always take care of him." The silence that followed Luna's speech was almost palpable. Even Judge Palmer, with all her professional coldness, seemed momentarily shaken. It was Ms. Silver who broke the silence. "Luna, thank you for your courage in speaking. May I ask you a question?" The girl nodded. "If you could choose where you and your brother would live from now on, what would be your choice?" Luna didn't hesitate. "With Uncle Caleb, but visiting Aunt Sandra and Uncle Paul on weekends." Then, as if afraid she had been rude, she quickly added, "They're really nice too. They make chocolate cake and are letting us get a dog when we move into the new house." An involuntary smile appeared on the prosecutor's face. "I see. And why do you want to live with Uncle Caleb?" Luna thought for a moment, carefully choosing her words. "Because he promised he would never let anyone separate us, and he doesn't break promises." She paused before adding, "And because he needs us too. He gets sad when he thinks nobody is watching, but he smiles for real when we're together." The surprisingly perceptive observation from a 7-year-old hit Caleb hard. It was true. Luna and Leo had brought genuine joy back into his life, something he hadn't thought possible after losing Mariana. Judge Palmer, visibly uncomfortable with the emotional turn the hearing was taking, tried to regain control. "Thank you for your testimony, Luna. You may return to your seat now." Luna obeyed, but before sitting down, she deliberately walked over to Caleb and took his hand, a silent but eloquent gesture of her choice. The judge consulted some documents, clearly trying to buy time to reorient her strategy. Finally, she addressed the foreign couple. "Mr. and Mrs. Hartman, I deeply regret the trouble this process has caused you. It has become evident that you were not adequately informed about the existence of Leo's older sister. Considering these new circumstances, do you still wish to proceed with the adoption process?" The interpreter translated the question, and the couple spoke briefly between themselves before replying. It was the woman, Elizabeth, who spoke in English with the interpreter translating. We came to this country with open hearts, seeking to complete our family with a child who needed love. We did not know Leo had a sister, and that changes everything. We would never consider separating siblings." She looked at Luna and Leo with genuine compassion. These children belong together. And it seems they have already found people willing to keep them united. We withdraw our adoption petition and wish them all the happiness in the world." The unexpected declaration seemed to completely dismantle Judge Palmer's strategy. Her gaze wandered around the room looking for a way out that would allow her to maintain control. "Given this new development," she finally said, "and considering the request from the district attorney's office, I agree to postpone the final decision on the custody of the children for 30 days, to allow for more in-depth investigations." Misty Silver intervened again. "And what about the immediate situation of the children, Your Honor?" The district attorney's office recommends maintaining temporary custody with Mr. and Mrs. Olson, with express authorization for regular visits from Mr. Morgan, while his adoption petition follows the normal procedures. The judge seemed about to object, but the prosecutor's presence and the unexpected turn of events limited her options. "Very well. Temporary custody remains with Sandra and Paul Olson. Mr. Morgan is authorized for regular visits under initial supervision by Child Protective Services, and all procedures related to the Southern Hope Shelter will be reviewed in light of the new allegations." Her withering look towards Judith made it clear that the former shelter director should not expect protection from the justice system. Judith seemed to shrink in her chair, finally understanding that the scheme she had operated in the shadows for so long was about to be exposed. The hearing was adjourned with a new date set, and an order for all documents related to the case to be preserved for investigation. As people began to leave, Caleb noticed Judge Palmer making a discreet gesture for Judith to meet her privately. "Edward," he called quietly, indicating with a glance. "They're going to meet." "I noticed," the lawyer replied. "Deborah has directional microphones installed at strategic points in the building. If they talk here, we'll have a recording." Caleb smiled slightly. His team's ability to anticipate moves remained impressive. In the hallway, Luna and Leo ran to Caleb, hugging his legs with evident relief. "Did we do it?" Luna asked, looking up with hope in her eyes. "Not completely yet," Caleb answered honestly. "But we took a big step today, and I promise we'll keep fighting until we do." Sandra approached, adjusting the bow in Luna's hair. "You were incredible in there. So brave and articulate." Luna smiled shyly. "I just told the truth." "Sometimes that's exactly what we need," commented Paul, affectionately ruffling the hair of Leo, who clung to his godfather's hand as if afraid of being taken away at any moment. The simple truth of a child. Rebecca Torres approached, accompanied by Ms. Silver. "Caleb, we need to talk about the next steps. I have information that other shelters are starting to clean up documents, now that the scheme is being exposed. And I need to update you on the measures the district attorney's office is taking," the prosecutor added, "including a formal request for Judge Palmer's recusal due to conflict of interest." "Can we meet later?" Caleb asked, looking meaningfully at the children. "I think we all deserve a moment to decompress first." Ms. Silver nodded, understanding. "Of course, my office at 4. We'll be there," Edward confirmed. As the group headed for the exit, Deborah hurried over, showing her tablet to Caleb. It was a message from her contacts at the hospital. Tanya Rogers had been discharged and was on her way to the courthouse, escorted by 2 investigators from the DA's office. Her food poisoning had been confirmed as mild poisoning, likely caused by something added to her coffee the previous night. "They're desperate," Edward commented, reading the message over Caleb's shoulder. "This just proves how close we are to the truth. And also how dangerous they are," Caleb added, instinctively pulling Luna and Leo closer to him. "We need to double our security until this is all over." Sandra sensed the tension in the air. "What's going on?" "We'll explain later," Caleb replied. "For now, I think we all deserve a celebratory lunch. After all, it's not every day we take such an important step towards forming a family." "Ice cream too?" Leo asked hopefully, speaking for the first time since the hearing. "Especially ice cream," Caleb assured him, smiling at the boy. As they left the courthouse, Caleb couldn't help but notice what a peculiar group they formed. A tech entrepreneur, A middle-class couple, 2 children rescued from a corrupt system, a hyper-efficient executive assistant and a renowned lawyer, an unconventional family, formed not by blood ties, but by conscious choices and mutual commitments. The following weeks were intense. The investigation into the shelter scheme expanded rapidly, revealing connections to judicial authorities, politicians, and even religious organizations that served as fronts for profitable adoption facilitation operations. Judge Palmer was removed from her duties, while Judith Campbell and several other shelter directors faced charges ranging from mistreatment to falsification of public documents. Tanya Rogers' formal testimony, combined with the evidence collected by Caleb's team and Rebecca Torres's investigative reports, formed a devastating dossier that exposed not just isolated cases of corruption, but an entire system designed to profit from the suffering of vulnerable children. Meanwhile, Caleb's adoption process moved forward, with the unconditional support of the Olsons. The home visits, psychological evaluations, and monitored cohabitation periods confirmed what was already evident to everyone following the case. A genuine bond had formed between Caleb and the children, a connection that transcended the relatively short time they had known each other. 6 months after that first tense hearing, a new session was scheduled, this time not to determine temporary custody, but to formalize the adoption. The new judge assigned to the case, Marina Albright, had a reputation for unshakable integrity and a history of decisions that genuinely prioritized the well-being of children. The courtroom was decorated with colorful balloons, a surprise organized by Deborah, who had become a sort of honorary aunt to Luna and Leo. The children, dressed in their best clothes, could barely contain their excitement. After carefully reviewing all documents and reports, Judge Albright announced, "I find that the petition for the full adoption of Luna and Leo by Caleb Morgan fully serves the best interests of the children. The established emotional bonds, the emotional and material stability offered, and most importantly, the demonstrated commitment to keeping the siblings together fully justify this decision." A gentle smile lit up her face as she addressed the children directly. "Luna, Leo, as of today, you officially become Luna Morgan and Leo Morgan. You not only have a new last name, but a complete family that includes a father and godparents who have shown unconditional love for you." Leo jumped from his chair with a shout of joy, while Luna remained motionless, silent tears streaming down her face, not tears of sadness, but of a happiness so intense it almost hurt. Furthermore, the judge continued, "I approve the formal agreement established between Caleb Morgan and the couple Sandra and Paul Olson, guaranteeing rights of regular cohabitation and active participation in the children's upbringing. This innovative arrangement recognizes that families can take many different forms, all equally valid when based on genuine love and commitment." The official formalization of what they already knew in their hearts was followed by a celebration at Caleb's apartment, which had been completely renovated in recent months to accommodate the children. Individual rooms decorated according to each one's preferences, a game room, and even a small science lab to nurture Luna's growing curiosity for experiments. Friends, colleagues, and everyone who had contributed to the extraordinary journey were present. Rebecca Torres, whose series of reports on the case had recently won an award for investigative journalism. Ms. Mara Silva, whose intervention at a critical moment had changed the course of events. Tanya Rogers, recovered from the poisoning, and now working with an NGO dedicated to reforming the shelter system. And, of course, Deborah and Edward, who had been by Caleb's side from the very first moment. In a quieter corner of the apartment, Sandra and Paul were talking with Caleb, while watching the children play with a Labrador puppy, the promised dog that had finally joined the family. "You've completely transformed your life for them," Sandra commented, with evident admiration. "Actually," Caleb replied, "watching Luna patiently teach Leo how to give the dog commands, they transformed mine. I was just existing since I lost Mariana. They brought me back to life." "You still miss her," Paul observed. It wasn't a question, but a statement. "Every day," Caleb admitted. "I think I always will. But now the pain shares space with joy." "Mariana would have loved the kids," he added with a wistful smile. "So especially Luna. They have the same determined spirit." "Have you told them about Mariana?" Sandra asked. Yes, I have pictures of her all over the apartment now. Luna asks about her sometimes. She says she wants to meet the auntie who lived in Daddy's heart before us. The simplicity and depth of the childish description so brought emotional smiles to all three. You know what Luna told me the other day? Caleb continued. That the fake hug she asked me for that day in the rain was the best lie of her life because it turned into the most important truth. Sandra discreetly wiped away a tear. That girl has an old soul. That's what her psychologist says, Caleb agreed. But she also says that for the first time, Luna is finally allowing herself to be a child, to play without worry, to get into mischief, even to have occasional tantrums, all the normal things that were denied to her for so long. At that moment, as if to illustrate the point, Luna and Leo ran up to them, followed by the puppy, which was barking excitedly. "Daddy!" Leo called, still delighting in the novelty of using the word. "Can we show Aunt Sandra and Uncle Paul our secret project?" What secret project would that be? Caleb asked, feigning ignorance. Luna rolled her eyes with the adorable exasperation of a child dealing with a deliberately obtuse adult. "The new house project, duh. The one we're going to build on the big lot near the park, with rooms for everyone." Paul raised his eyebrows, looking questioningly at Caleb. "Oh, that project," Caleb smiled. "Well, it was supposed to be a surprise for the godparents. But since you mentioned it, in the previous months, while the adoption process was underway, Caleb had bought a large plot of land in a quiet neighborhood on the outskirts of Seattle. The plan, developed with the enthusiastic participation of the children, was to build a house large enough to accommodate the extended family they had formed. One wing would be the main residence for Caleb, Luna, and Leo, but there would also be a completely independent space for Sandra and Paul to use whenever they wanted, allowing the children to move freely between both homes on the same property. "You didn't have to," Paul began. "Visibly moved. It's not a matter of having to," Caleb interrupted gently. "It's a matter of wanting to. You are part of this family now. The children need all of us, and there's room for more dogs," Leo added with the impeccable logic of children. Sandra laughed, pulling her godson into a tight hug. "Of course there is, my love." Luna, always more reflective, looked between the adults with her perceptive eyes. "We're going to be a different kind of family, aren't we? Not like the others." "Yes," Caleb confirmed, stroking his daughter's hair. "A family built by choice, not just by chance. I think that makes it even more special, don't you?" Luna considered the question with the seriousness that characterized her reflections. "I think so, because we chose each other, even when it was hard." The child's simple wisdom perfectly captured the essence of what they had lived through. Amidst corruption, institutional neglect, and dehumanizing bureaucracy, an unlikely group of people had come together to protect two vulnerable children, and in the process they had formed bonds that transcended conventional definitions of family. Later that night, when the party was over and the house was quiet, Caleb went to check on the children before going to bed. He found Luna still awake, sitting on her bed with a photo album open on her lap. The album that contained memories of the last few months, from that first encounter in the rain to the official celebration of their new family. "Can't sleep?" he asked, sitting on the edge of the bed. Luna shook her head. "I was thinking." "About what?" "About how everything changed so fast. One day I was in the shelter, afraid of losing Leo forever. And now we're here with a new last name, a dog, and a big family." Caleb smiled. "Life can change suddenly sometimes, can't it?" "Yes," Luna agreed, closing the album carefully. Then she looked at Caleb with those eyes that seemed to see beyond the surface. "That day in the rain I asked for a fake hug. But now all the hugs are real, aren't they?" "All of them," Caleb confirmed, feeling a lump in his throat. "And they always will be." Luna nodded, seemingly satisfied with the answer. She lay down and pulled the covers up to her chin. "Good night, Dad." "Good night, sweetie," Caleb replied, leaning down to kiss her forehead. As he left the room, he paused to watch Leo, fast asleep with the puppy curled at his feet. The boy was smiling in his sleep, a serene smile that spoke of safety and belonging. In the living room, Caleb stopped in front of a framed photograph of Mariana. "You would have loved them," he whispered. "And they would have loved you." There was no answer, of course, but for a brief moment Caleb felt a peace he hadn't experienced in a long time. The pain of loss would never completely disappear, but now it coexisted with the joy of a new beginning, of a rediscovered purpose. What had begun with a fake hug on a rainy sidewalk had transformed into the deepest truth of his life. That family is not defined by blood or conventions, but by daily choices of love and commitment. And that sometimes, in the most unexpected moments, when we are walking aimlessly in the rain, the universe places in our path exactly the people we need, and who, perhaps also need us. Dear listeners, we hope the story of Caleb, Luna, and Leo has deeply touched your hearts. For those who were moved by this journey of unexpected encounters that transform lives, we have a special playlist with equally captivating narratives about families formed by the heart and not by blood. Find it by clicking the link on the left. If this story stirred emotions in you, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and leave a like. Also share in the comments which city you are tuning in from, and if you have witnessed real stories of adoption that have transformed lives. Every day we bring new narratives that explore the complexity of human bonds and the beauty of new beginnings. Until our next story.